bringing today's Korea to the world. It is Thursday, November 9th, here in Seoul. And News Today starts now.
The Korea Electric Power Corporation will raise industrial power price, but the spike will mainly apply to large companies. Some criticize Kepco's move for not addressing the fundamental issue, adding that it won't be enough to drastically improve its financial situation. In 2021, police began investigation after a plastic bag with narcotic syringes was caught on a fishing line. After carrying out DNA analysis of the blood traces, officials detained more than 21 drug criminals. A man was sentenced to 4 months in prison and a year of probation for not paying roughly 40 million won in child support over 6 years. Many were outraged by the lenient verdict, and the ex-wife vowed to appeal.
Welcome back. I'm Tae-Gyeon, and we start off with our top stories. The government has resolved to increase electricity rates for industrial users, specifically targeting large corporations, in an effort to alleviate the financial pressure on households and small businesses. This measure, though intended to minimize public burden, has drawn criticism for overlooking the urgent need for Kepco's financial stabilization.
The Korea Electric Power Corporation, also known as Kepco, decided to raise industrial power price by 10.61 per kilowatt hour. However, electricity prices for residential use and SMEs will remain the same. Even among industries, large corporations will mainly have to pay higher prices for power use.
산업용을 사용자들은 상대적으로 부담 여력이 있고 또 대규모로 전력을 사용 중인 점을 고려하였습니다.
Roughly 42,000 businesses stand to pay higher electricity fees. They account for only 0.2% of electricity-consuming businesses, but use up about half of the generated power. Companies struggling from poor performances are concerned that they have to spend more.
대기업만 올라갔다 그러니 중소기업으로서 한숨은 쉬지만은 또 앞으로도 계속 올라갈 거 아니에요, 이거. 걱정입니다. 그렇다고 해서 우리가 인가공료를 더 받을 수가 없거든요.
With the latest price hike, state-backed Kepco expects to make up roughly 400 billion won of its losses this year and about 2.8 trillion won next year. But that is not enough to drastically improve Kepco's financial situation. Kepco's total debt has already snowballed to over 200 trillion won, and energy prices may remain volatile for the rest of the year and beyond.
북반구에 위치한 나라들이 이제 다음 달이 되면 일제히 난방을 시작하면서 국제 에너지 가격이 올라갈 예정이거든요. 안정적으로 전기를 공급할 수 있는 체력을 확보하는 데는 좀 부족함이.
Meanwhile, Kepco announced its plan to carry out extensive personnel restructuring and sell lucrative real estate. The Korean National Electrical Workers Union criticized the state-affiliated Kepco's price hike for not addressing the fundamental issue of normalizing energy prices while disregarding public interest.
2 years ago, a fisherman in Busan inadvertently reeled in a bag of drug-filled syringes. A thorough 2-year probe by the Coast Guard has now led to the arrest of 21 people involved in drug trafficking and use, including one individual who disguised himself as a woman to elude police detection.
A person with short hair donning a dress gets on an elevator and looks in a mirror to fix the hair. The following day, that same person is seen with long hair and dress shoes walking the hallway of a studio apartment building. This person is in fact a man in his 30s disguised as a woman. He tried to hide his identity to avoid investigators after using methamphetamine in this building. The police raided the home of a man in his 50s. While investigating the man disguised as a woman who had been detained earlier, police found that this man sold and used methamphetamine. The investigation began in November of 2021 after a plastic bag was caught on a fishing line. The bag contained a bundle of syringes with leftover narcotics. The police analyzed the DNA in blood traces found in the needles and tracked down the 2 drug offenders. After more than 2 years of investigation, 21 drug criminals have been detained, including those who sold illegal drugs.
통신을 통해서 휴대폰을 추적을 한다든지 대화 내용 같은 것도 확인을 하고 다각도로 저희들이 이제 증거 수집을.
The perpetrators were found to come from a wide range of age groups and professions, from college students, office workers, real estate agents to telecom service consultants. The illegal drugs are mostly brought via international mail from Thailand and Vietnam. The perpetrators used Telegram to exchange information and distributed the drugs by hiding them in designated places.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has named Cho Lee-dae, a former justice of the Supreme Court, as the new chief of the top court. The nomination comes 33 days after the National Assembly rejected Yoon's previous pick for Supreme Court Justice Lee Kyun-yong. Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Dae-gil said in a press briefing on Wednesday that as a judge, he dedicated his entire life to ensuring the people's right to stand trial. And as a Supreme Court justice, he demonstrated rational and fair judgment in accordance with law and principles. A deadbeat dad charged with not paying child support for 6 years post-divorce has been given a suspended sentence, sparking outcry from child support claimants who demand an actual prison term.
A man leaves the court after being sentenced. When reporters started asking questions, he suddenly started to bolt. He ran like a sprinter to ditch the reporters and even jumped over the building fence. The man surnamed Song was tried for not paying child support after his divorce. After his divorce in 2017, he should have paid 300,000 won per child every month to support his 3 children. But he was indicted for not paying roughly 40 million won in child support over the past 6 years. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison and a year of probation in the first trial. The court ruled the defendant needs to be not only criticized morally but penalized criminally for the considerable amount of unpaid child support. But the judge added that the fact that he had made partial payment was taken into account in the sentencing. The court warned, however, that if he is ever tried again for not paying child support, he won't be guaranteed probation then. The prosecution had asked the court last month for a sentence of 6 months in prison without probation for Song. Victims of child support arrears who had wanted the court to hand down the punishment of actual imprisonment couldn't hide their disappointment.
이런 식으로 판결 낼 것 같으면 저 판결 안 받아요.
Song's ex-wife, who was at the courtroom to observe the trial, said the sentence was disappointing and that she would appeal.
학업을 다녀야 되기 때문에 못 해주는 게 제일 안쓰러운 거죠. 재판부에서 아이들만 증명 생각해줬으면 좋겠어요.
The law was revised 2 years ago so that those who don't pay child support can be subject to criminal punishment. But the penalties have mostly been fines or summary indictments. Those who were actually tried in court were the 14 absent fathers whom the prosecution indicted this year. The Supreme Prosecutor's Office recently responded to the lenient penalty criticism by distributing a case processing guideline with the instruction that child support arrears should be indicted in principle.
Meanwhile, concerns over fugitive criminals are mounting following the Kim Gil-soo escape incident. Recently, a fraud suspect on trial for a 9 billion won case disappeared while under electronic surveillance, leading to a blame-shifting debate among responsible agencies.
A man surnamed Chun is accused of pocketing 9.1 billion won by deceiving people with a fraudulent investment scheme.
자기는 이렇게 특별하게 싼 값에 갖고 와서 1000%씩 남긴다. 10배씩 남긴다는 겁니다.
He was arrested in January last year. A month later, Chun was released on bail with an order to put on an electronic anklet. But he cut off the tagging device and fled on the day his first trial sentence was scheduled to be delivered. At the time, prosecutors asked the court to sentence him to 10 years in prison.
갚았다고 입출금을 거꾸로 조작해서 냈다가 판사한테 걸려서 법정에서 좋지 않은 소리를 들은 걸로 알고 있어요. 그러면서 도망간 거예요.
He has been at large for more than a month since then.
KBS에서 나왔는데 아무도 안 계세요?
In the meantime, there has been circumstantial evidence that Chun is running a business similar to the fraudulent one he operated with his partner, acting as the head.
저 대표님 있잖아요. 혹시 어디 가 계신지 아세요?
네, 해외로 출장 가신 걸로 알고 있어요. 네, 회의하고 그리고 이제 영업 지시.
The question is then, how can he remain on the run? This is because related agencies have been shifting responsibility onto each other. In a question about who is in charge of tracking down Chun, the Justice Department said that when a person on bail damages an electronic anklet, its role is just to notify the court. The court said that it needs investigation agencies' cooperation since it has no authority and personnel to catch him on its own. The prosecution said they had one staked out to catch Chun, adding that they need a warrant to trace him down, and it is the court that should take action. Kim Bong-yeon, the main culprit in the Lime asset management scandal, was released on the condition that he had to wear an electronic anklet. But he also ran away on the day his final sentence was to be delivered. At the time, the Justice Department immediately asked the police to investigate. On the day Kim escaped, prosecutors and the police put him on the wanted list and began tracking him down. But in Chun's case, the court and prosecutor began taking action only after the victims told media outlets about the fraud. The court issued an arrest warrant for Chun last week, about a month after he had already fled. With the arrest warrant, prosecutors are belatedly chasing Chun.
The Seoul City government has designated regions near Gwanghwamun, City Hall, and Uljido Ilga as reusable cup zones to encourage the use of tumblers and multi-use cups. The city government will establish needed infrastructure to better follow up with the eco-friendly measure, which went into effect on Thursday. As a result, multi-use cups will be available at more coffee houses and cafes in the regions. As the outbreak of lumpy skin disease continues to spread, a state of emergency has been declared in response to avian influenza potentially carried by migratory birds this winter. However, the shortage of veterinary public officers to tackle livestock disease is causing serious concerns about a breach in disease prevention and control measures.
Staff at a veterinary service laboratory analyzed collected samples. The laboratory is busy these days as lumpy skin disease has spread to more than 30 cattle farms in the province since the first case on October 20th. They are also tasked with the surveillance of avian influenza, which could be spread by migratory birds quite soon. The lab's infectious disease division has been operating around the clock for 3 weeks in a row.
곧 이제 고병원성 야생조류에서 저희가 양성이 나오거나 하면 그다음부터는 저희가 이제 비상사태로.
But there is no personnel to cover for the lab workers. Early this year, the government of Chungcheongnam-do Province posted wanted ads to hire 32 public officials with veterinary licenses, but only 3 applications were received and only 2 positions were filled.
365일 비상근무를 하고 있는 그런 상황이다 보니까 아무래도 지원 인력이 적고 그로 인해서 워라밸 자체가 적용이 되지 않는 그 업무를 담당을 하고 있어서 인력 확보에 참 어려운 점이 있습니다.
With more than 30 positions remaining vacant, the lab is on the verge of collapsing.
양성무심 농장을 한번 들어가게 되면 저희가 7일간 이동 제한이 걸리거든요. 나중에는 들어갈 사람이 없는 거예요.
Due to the prolonged shortages of public veterinary officials, quarantine authorities are having a hard time not only with the prevention of livestock infectious diseases, but also with post-management.
In the wake of the deadly 2017 Daecheon Sports Center blaze that took 29 lives, South Korea amended its Fire Services Act, allowing for fines against illegal parking that hinders emergency services. Yet in practice, these rules often remain unenforced, merely existing on paper.
The parking lot of this apartment complex is completely full in the evening. Cars are parked even in areas designated for fire trucks. It is illegal.
어쩔 수 없이 주차장이 없으니까 모자라니까 좋게 얘기하는 사람도 있지만 시행길만 내는 사람도 있고.
A fire truck that was returning after a rescue operation was stuck in this apartment complex for about 20 minutes because a way out was blocked by illegally parked vehicles.
다행히 출동이 없었으니까 망정이지만 또 출동이 있었으면 저희도 어쩔 수 없는 상황에서 계속 지체될 수밖에 없기 때문에.
Under the Framework Act on Firefighting Services, which was revised in 2018, owners of illegally parked vehicles in areas designated for fire engines or areas adjacent to them are subject to a fine of up to 1 million won. Over the past 5 years, more than 20,000 reports have been received nationwide. But only 1.4% of them, or some 290 reports, resulted in levying fines on the violators. This is because a revised law applies only to new apartment buildings whose construction permits were applied for after 2018. In Wonju, Gangwon-do Province, the new law applies to only 3 out of some 240 apartment complexes.
더 위험하고 재난이 커질 수 있는데 과태료를 부과해서 법의 실효성을 담보할 수 있도록 개정안을.
With parking spaces being in short supply at most of the apartment complexes in the nation, the law's revision is expected to hit numerous snags, making it all the more urgent for the residents to cooperate with the authorities by avoiding illegal parking.
And that's all we have for your news today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.